Begin this morning, though, with that alarming rise of COVID cases across the country. Hospitals are now flooded with new cases of the Delta variant at the same time that Omicron variant spreads quickly throughout the U.S.
6 states, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, New York, and Illinois, now account for 60% of the country's recent COVID hospitalizations. New York and Maine have already called on the National Guard for extra support to help hospitals that are struggling to keep their ICU beds open. Dr. Anthony Fauci is urging more Americans to get their COVID booster shots immediately as the COVID death toll climbs once again.
We would hope that a third shot boost of an mRNA would not only increase the height of the response, the breadth of the response, but we're hoping that would increase the durability of response. And there's reason to believe that that might happen, because when you do a boost, you really increase what we call the affinity maturation of the response, which means you give it broader coverage. Hopefully that broader will also be broader duration.
Meanwhile, new data from Pfizer suggests their booster vaccine is effective in protecting against the Omicron variant and Delta variant, giving new hope for those who are looking to boost their protection. We have our expert, Dr. Bob Lahita, standing by to answer our questions. But first, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton from Stamford, Connecticut, with more on the rise of COVID cases in that state. All right, we're going to hold off on Antonia here for a second, and we'll bring in a few questions for Dr. Bob.
Yeah, Dr. Bob, always great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Lahita is, of course, a professor at the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine and the director of the Institute for Autoimmune and Rheumatic Diseases at St. Joseph Health. Dr. Bob, so let's first talk about what Dr. Anthony Fauci told our Lester Holt last night, and it's about booster shots and kind of talking through what it means to be fully vaccinated. First, let's go ahead and listen to that if we have that sound.
This is something that's on the table, that's being discussed. I don't see it happening immediately, but I think as time goes by and we learn more about the importance of this with regard to the new variant, I think you'll be seeing at least a consideration of this.
Do you think we're headed in that direction, though, making that new recommendation?
I believe so, Lest. I can't say for sure, and I don't want to have any promises for people, but at least it's being seriously discussed.
So, Dr. Bob, what do you think about that? Is it time to change the series recommendation given this spike in cases we're seeing, especially in the Northeast? That's where Antonia was, as Joe just mentioned, and we'll get to in a moment. That's really where we're seeing this spike, especially as it gets colder, things like that. What do you think about what it means to be fully vaccinated?
We predicted this, Savannah, going forward. Remember, we talked about the holidays and the fact that we clumped together in homes, some vaccinated, some unvaccinated. I think Tony Fauci's comment about the durability of the vaccine and the need for a booster. Everybody should get a booster. There's no question about it. And for once, they're talking about T cells and B cells, the cellular aspects of the immune system, which are very important and probably more important than neutralizing antibody. So, yes, we have a rise in cases in the Northeast, and we hope we're having durable vaccination and durable effects on our immune systems.
So, Dr. Bob, what we're going to talk about in just a moment is the fact that in some of these Northeast states, we're seeing this spike in COVID cases. States like Connecticut, and Connecticut was actually the first state that successfully vaccinated half of its adults. Here in New York, where I am, state leaders have pushed for strict COVID guidelines, and we have had those good vaccination rates. Does this tell us anything about the Delta variant that we're seeing some of these states that seem to have had this full court press on COVID have these spikes?
Well, what's happening is exactly what was predicted because of the unvaccinated population. And even if you've got 20% of the population unvaccinated, the vaccinated can still carry the virus. The unvaccinated get the virus and get the severe disease and wind up populating our hospitals, our intensive care units, and oftentimes on ventilators die. So people have to realize that this is a cycle which could be broken, but right now it's not, Savannah.
Now let's talk about this new variant, the Omicron variant. What we're actually seeing right now is mostly Delta spreading, but according to preliminary reports from the World Health Organization, Omicron, this new variant that we are seeing in several states across the country, is more transmissible than the Delta variant, but it might not cause as severe of cases. So we still have a lot to learn here. But what does that mean? And kind of what's your takeaway from that? Does decreased severity mean less dangerous? And could people still be getting that long COVID? Does this make you more or less worried than we were about Delta?
Well, we don't know about the long-term effects of the Omicron variant. We do know that it's about 5 to 6 times more transmissible, meaning more sticky, meaning if you have it in a room and you have unvaccinated people in your Christmas party and you're carrying Omicron, everybody's going to have Omicron, including those who are vaccinated. But the ones who are vaccinated, according to Pfizer and the CDC, are not going to be as sick. So, yes, we're going to see it spread. And I predict that by March 1st, that'll be the predominant strain.
By March 1st, you heard it from Dr. Bob Lahida. Dr. Bob, always great to have you. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Savannah. Good to see you.
Let's bring in Antonia Hilton. She is in hard-hit Connecticut this morning. So, Antonia, Connecticut was the first state in the country to successfully vaccinate half of its adults. It's continued to lead the nation in vaccination rates. Why are we seeing such a sharp rise in cases there right now?
Well, Joe, that is exactly what officials here are scrambling to respond to as we get closer and closer to Christmas, to New Year's. And look, what we're seeing happen, according to NBC data, is about a 60% uptick in cases. And according to statewide data, about 575 people are hospitalized right now. And that represents about actually more than 3 times where they were just a couple weeks ago. So officials are working on this, and what they're focusing on their attention on as in terms of causes is that they think that the cold weather, the amount of time that people are starting to spend inside with loved ones and friends indoors, and then most crucially, waning immunity among those who already went out and got vaccinated. So that's where a huge focus is going to be all day today where I am at Scalzi Park. There's going to be a vaccination clinic. And while they, of course, are targeting folks who haven't been vaccinated, it's many of those folks who have waning immunity, who got vaccinated many, many months ago, who they now are trying to reach.
So on top of clinics like that, what else are leaders doing, including state leaders, to try and bring down hospitalization rates and slow down the spread of COVID there? All right, and we might have had tech issues again with Antonia. We thank Antonia Hilton for that report from Stamford, Connecticut. Now, the COVID battle is colliding with politics on Capitol Hill. Last night, the Senate voted to roll back President Biden's vaccine mandate for large private employers. 2 Democrats joined Republicans to pass the resolution, which now goes to the House, where it faces a very uncertain future.
Yeah, that's right. And the mandate is actually already stalled in the courts amid a wave of litigation. And this was a bipartisan rebuke of a key component of the White House's plan to fight the virus.
Joining us now is NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell and NBCNews.com senior White House reporter Shannon Pettypiece. Good morning to both of you. Leanne, we're going to start with you. Republicans brought this to the Senate floor under what's known as the Congressional Review Act, which allows Congress to review presidential executive orders. So was this a serious blow to the mandate, or was it more just political theater?
It's more just political theater, Joe, and that's because of the rules that mandate how these things come up. So when it goes to the House, Speaker Pelosi does not have to bring it up. Republicans can force it, but they need to find 5 Democrats to do so. But yesterday on the Senate floor, the fact that this got a vote, it was necessary, is mandated that it got a vote. It did re-emerge the debate over vaccine mandates. Leader Schumer warned the body that they are on the verge of pushing an anti-vaccine message. Let's listen to what Schumer said and then how McConnell responded.
There should be one message and one message only coming from this chamber to the American people. Get vaccinated, get boosted, stay safe yourself, keep your families, your communities, and our country safe. The worst thing we can do is tie our own hands behind our backs.
The federal government, elites in Washington, cannot micromanage citizens' personal choices without a legitimate basis in law and the Constitution. And that goes double for presidents going far beyond the bounds of their office and their authority. President Biden's absurd private sector vaccine mandate is blatant overreach. It is illegal.
So in the vote, it got the support of all Republicans. 2 Democrats supported it, Joe Manchin of West Virginia and John Tester of Montana, signaling that this is a toxic political issue, something that Republicans hope to carry into 2022 and the midterm elections, Joe.
And Shannon, let's bring you in here. So how is the White House responding to that vote, as well as the fact that federal courts have blocked this mandate?
Yeah, well, you're right. They are fighting this on a number of fronts. There's the court, there is Congress, and now there's also the court of public opinion. We have seen a number of Democratic governors come out now and raise questions or concerns about this vaccine mandate. But the White House is standing by their position on this. They say that they do have a legal right to mandate. Large employers require their employees to be vaccinated under the laws and regulations that enable the federal government to regulate workplace safety. So that's the sort of case the administration is making. Now, they also believe that these mandates work, and they have seen when they're put in place, they significantly drive up the rate of vaccination. For example, there is a federal workplace mandate. When that went in place, the administration said 92% of federal workers were in compliance. So they are defending these mandates. They say the number one task of this administration is to get people vaccinated. They want to get people beyond the pandemic, and they found mandates to be a very effective way to do that.
Leanne, let's stick with the Senate, but hit a different topic. Tell us about the debt ceiling vote that's scheduled for later today.
Yeah, that is finally going to come up before the December 15th deadline, but this is not the final step, Joe. What's going to happen today is they attached a rule change to a Medicare bill that would change the rules on how the Senate is able to lift the debt limit. So the vote today will need 60 votes. That means it'll need the support of all Democrats plus 10 Republicans. After this rule change is signed into law by the president, then the Senate can come back and actually lift the debt limit with just a simple majority, with just simple Democrats. This is legislative gymnastics to appease Republican politics of not actually voting to lift the debt limit, but it should get done before the December 15th deadline that Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says is the time it must happen by. Joe, Savannah.
And Shannon, let's also cover, before we let you guys go, the January 6th committee investigating the Capitol attack. So yesterday, former President Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, didn't show for a scheduled deposition. We've seen a lot of this, a lack of cooperation. What's the latest there?
Well, he is now suing the committee, asking a federal court to block enforcement of this subpoena coming from the committee. He is citing executive privilege, which is a protection the courts have given to previous presidents, saying that conversations between top advisors should be confidential. The White House has waived that executive privilege, saying that it is the right of the office of the president to determine who gets to assert executive privilege, not a former president. Here's a bit more what Meadows had to say last night.
This lawsuit really goes to the heart of the matter. The fact is that we've been trying for weeks and weeks to make accommodations to share non-privileged, and I want to stress that, non-privileged information while protecting the executive privilege that President Trump has claimed. And yet what we found is each and every time there was an overreach on the part of the committee. And then in the last 72 hours, we received a subpoena that went to our telecommunication carrier that was so broad that you would have to do some type of legislative contortions to find a legislative reason for that subpoena. And I can tell you, they did this without notifying us.
And the committee pushed back in a statement yesterday saying that they believe that this lawsuit will fail and that they will be meeting next week to advance a report recommending that the House cite Meadows for contempt of Congress and refer him to the Department of Justice for prosecution. So we've certainly not seen the end of this back and forth here, guys.
All right, Shannon and Leanne, thank you so much.
Testimony resumes this morning for the second day of the trial of Kim Potter. She's the former Minnesota police officer who shot and killed 20-year-old Dante Wright earlier this year during a traffic stop. Potter is facing first-degree and second-degree manslaughter charges. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster joins us now from the courthouse in Minneapolis. Shaq, good morning to you. So yesterday we heard emotional testimony from Dante Wright's mother. What did she say?
Extremely emotional testimony, Joe. And this is someone who is not just a fact witness, but was the so-called spark of life witness. Someone who can go in the courtroom and bring life, talk about the memories of Dante Wright. But she had extremely powerful testimony. I want you to listen to some of it now.
Female answered the phone because it was FaceTime. She was screaming. And I was like, what's wrong? And she said that they shot him. And she faced the phone towards the driver's seat. And my son was laying there. He was unresponsive.
Katie then says she called 911 to see exactly where her son was, arrived at the scene and stayed there for several hours because although she couldn't reach her son's body, she identified it as it being her son based on his shoes that poked out underneath the white sheet. Joe?
So, Shaq, what is Kim Potter's defense saying about what happened the day of the shooting?
Well, in the opening statements, we heard Kim Potter's attorneys frame this as being about Daunte Wright's actions, that the stop was legal. They say that he was evading arrest, and despite the fact that he had a warrant, and that him evading arrest by getting back in that car put her partners at risk, and that is why she used force. But they say it was a mistaken use of force in terms of it being a gun. They say she was reaching for her taser and instead used her firearm. She's pleading not guilty to the charges that she's facing. Remember, those two charges of first and second degree manslaughter, they carry up to 15 years in prison if she's convicted.
And Shaq, we also heard from a fellow police officer who responded to the stop. What did we learn from him about the moments leading up to the shooting?
Who actually who made the decision to pull Daunte Wright's car over. He said the car hesitated before making a left turn, and then he noticed the air freshener dangling, and when he ran the tags, he saw that they were expired plates, or it was expired registration. So that is why he decided to pull Daunte Wright over. He says that he tried to get him out the car once he realized that that warrant existed, and then listen to a little bit more of his testimony from there.
I heard her say, I'm going to tase you again, I believe a second time. And then I believe that is when I heard taser, taser. At that same time, when she yelled that, that's when I was reaching into the vehicle trying to grab what I believed was the stick shift when Daunte grabbed in that area of the steering column. I just tried to undo whatever he did. And then that's when I just heard a bang.
What was it?
It was a firearm.
Yesterday, we saw a brand new body camera video of the moments after that moment that you just heard that officer describe. And you saw Kim Potter inconsolable. She was on the ground. She was crying. She kept saying, "Oh, my God, I just shot a kid." She even said, "I am going to prison." That is all evidence that is coming up as the prosecution tries to paint her as someone who acted recklessly, who should have known better when she reached her for her Glock instead of her taser. Joe?
Shaq Brewster recapping a big day of testimony in Minnesota. Thank you, Shaq.
Jury deliberations are underway in the trial of Jussie Smallett, who's charged with staging an anti-gay racist attack against himself and lying to police about it. Smallett testified over 2 days that he was the victim of a real hate crime, calling the claims he faked it 100% false. But the two brothers accused of attacking the former Empire actor also testified under oath and said they were recruited by Smallett. For more on this, let's go to NBC News correspondent Megan Fitzgerald, who's on the ground in Chicago with the latest. Megan, good morning. So I just mentioned those jury deliberations have begun after the trial that lasted just over a week. Tell us what jurors heard during closing arguments and what do we know about the deliberations so far this morning?
Savannah, good morning. You know, this was the last opportunity that both sides had to really try and plead their case. So we saw the prosecution going after Smallett, saying that he lied about this entire thing, that it was a hoax, reminding jurors that he didn't cooperate with this police investigation. He didn't turn over his DNA. He didn't turn over his cell phone. And then also pointing out that in the days leading up to this attack, Smallett told police that he received a racist phone call. Police wanting to dig a little bit deeper, wanting to get his cell phone to try and see if they could track down that caller, but that he wouldn't cooperate. So the prosecution telling jurors, look, he never wanted police to get to the bottom of this entire situation because it was a hoax. And then, of course, we saw the defense going after the prosecution's star witnesses, the Osundario brothers. These are the men that the prosecution says that Smallett allegedly paid that $3,500 to orchestrate this entire attack. The defense saying that they're liars and that they shouldn't be believed, and also going after this police investigation, saying that this was shoddy police work. And remember, all the defense has to do is sow a piece of doubt here. If jurors have any doubt at all, they are to find him not guilty.
So,
Savannah?
Megan, as I laid out and as you just did a great job in terms of the closing arguments, but this has really been a he said, they said back and forth between Smallett and those two brothers. And anytime any piece of evidence was introduced, anytime anything was brought up, they really both had these different explanations for what it was that was going on there. So for the jury now, is there hard evidence that they're considering, or is it mostly going to come down to this cross-examination of the witnesses that have these two different stories?
I mean, Savannah, you're absolutely right. You really hit the nail on the head there. I mean, this ultimately does sort of come down to he said, they said. But there is some evidence, the prosecution pointing to one of the pieces of evidence here is the stitched together surveillance video that shows the moments. The prosecution says Smallett took the brothers on a dry run of the attack. And so you could see his car, and they paint the picture that this was going over, what they need to do at the time that they're going to attack. So the practice run, if you will. The defense arguing that, no, that's not the case, that this is a routine situation, that Smallett would pick up the brothers, they would drive around, they would smoke a blunt, and then he just dropped them off. So nothing unusual there. So again, it really does come down to testimony and who jurors will believe based off of their explanation of what happened when they took the witness stand, Savannah.
All right, Megan, we will be watching as that jury starts deliberating. Thank you so much.
Time for a check on your morning news now weather.
Which, of course, means time for Bill Cairns to join us. Hi, Bill. Good morning.
Do you know what the best snow is?
Fluffy.
Lots.
It's the snow that will make it look pretty, but not stick on the roads.
Stay.
And that is
Stick on the roads, Bill, or stick
nice.
in your driveway for you to have to shovel?
Either way. If I don't have to shovel it and I can just look at it, that's perfect. I didn't get it, but my friends to the north did. Let me take you into Connecticut. Connecticut, Massachusetts, a little bit in upstate New York around Albany. They got their first accumulating snow of the year. It took long enough. It was only about an inch, maybe 1 or 2 inches. But again, it made it look pretty, but the roads were just wet and they were fine. Now, overnight, unfortunately, the temperatures have dropped a little bit, and I did hear about some areas with some slick spots. So you do have to be a little extra careful, especially traveling over any bridges or interpasses. But that's about it. So it wasn't a big event, but it was the first snow of the year in a few spots. So let's get to the next big storm. It is moving into the west. This one will go across the country over the upcoming weekend. And this one, unlike the one I just showed you, will bring some significant snows. We got about 8 to 10 million people that are under winter storm warnings or watches or advisories. And this one's finally going to deliver some snow to the high country of Utah, Colorado. And then this one spills into the plains. And this could be a decent little snowstorm for our friends in Nebraska, northern portions of South Dakota, northern Iowa, southern Minnesota. And the snow forecast has been increasing for Minneapolis. So the trend is going up. Right now, Minneapolis looks like about 6 inches of snow. But just to the south of there, around Rochester and through central Wisconsin, possibilities of 6 to 12. So for today's forecast, a little cold in New England. Still very warm in Texas. Next hour, guys, we are going to talk about this epic heat wave that is coming for the U.S. next week. We have a chance of breaking all-time record December high temperatures. It's going to be something else. We'll talk about that coming up.
All right. No shoveling there. All right. Thank you, Bill.
Really, thanks.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.